and then there were 4. We're now finally at the prelims for the AFL season. It's here, the final 4. Sydney, Port, Lions, Geelong, 4 teams, 4 states as well, all fighting it out to take home the cup and be at the G next weekend for the grand final. And this will be the preview for those games. I think a couple of massive games. It's really interesting. I think you think back to probably round 16, 17-ish. If you had said these were the final 4 teams of the, at this time of year, these were the teams going to be in the 4 prelim, it'd be, no one would believe you. Everyone would agree Sydney's probably there, and it does still feel like Sydney's flag to lose. But for Geelong to be there, Lions, Port, even Port finishing second still at the start of the final series, I think a ton of people would have been shocked if you had said that they were going to actually make it to the prelims as well. Lions, if you had said they were going to make it at halftime in the game last week, no one probably believes you. So it's interesting. And let's kick it off with the first game of the weekend, Friday night, SCG. The Sydney Swans take on Port Adelaide Power, first versus second in the regular season standings. And as I just said, it does feel like it's Sydney's flag to lose, in my opinion. I think they're the best team in the comp. They've got experience. I think they know what it takes to get it done. But then again, Port do have the high of coming off last week. A great win over Hawks. A lot of turmoil around that game. It will be interesting to see whether Port played their final last week. Were they so emotionally invested in that game? The outburst from Ken afterwards. Have they played their grand final essentially? And now they're going to fall back into it again and not be able to get back up for this game against Sydney, who not only will be fighting to get to the grand final, but also have a point to prove after the last time these two teams met. Port thumped them, 100-point loss, kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. Sydney were kind of sliding in their form, but no one saw a result of that magnitude coming. It just was mental and Sydney were pointless for a large portion of that game as well. And so it'll be a test of how much Port can get up for it. I think you know what to expect when it comes to Sydney. For them, it's about that first quarter. What can they do there? Can they actually finally come out to a good, fast start? If they do that, game's over. Unless Port need to come out and have a convincing lead at quarter time, for me, if they're a chance in this game. If they even let it be close within a couple of goals, I think Sydney will eventually just run away with it. They know the SCG so well, and they'll be able to make the most of it, whereas I think Port will just struggle. And Sydney also doing a 2-for-1, I think, with the memberships for the fans, with 2-for-1 tickets for members this game as well. So the crowd will be hostile, it'll be a packed out house, and so it'll be tough for Port to really see what they'll do. And I think the quality of Sydney will show. They were the best team all year. They've been one of the best teams. I was going to say one of the best teams in finals. They did, but it feels like they've played more than that one game against GWS, but they'll still have the confidence of that game, being able to turn around that result. Isaac Heaney will be well up for this after putting in the display he did in that final, and it was unbelievable, and they'll have a point to prove. And there's just so many different motivations that will come out of this game as well when you get to the grand final. Who are different options as to what could play out for the matchups. If it's Sydney Geelong, call back to 2022 as well. Sydney will have a point to prove against that Geelong side, and after they got thumped there. If it's Port Lions, thinking back to 2004 as well, getting there. But for the prelim, I think Sydney will have it. I think they'll win. I think it'll be a fairly convincing win, if I'm honest. I can see this being 6 goals plus to Sydney. For me, Port feel like a team that they'll just, once it starts not going their way, I think they'll emotionally check out, and they'll just not be able to get it back. I think they just won't be able to rally themselves back for a comeback against Sydney. And so it's why I think it does all come down to the start, because if Sydney get that fast start that they've struggled for, this is the perfect game for them to find the first quarter form. If they can do that, I think Port will just struggle, because I think that second quarter Sydney will kick away a bit. And then how I anticipate the entire game going in my head when I picture it, I go, it's a pretty quick. I think Port will kick a couple of goals first, and then so the first 10 minutes will be a bit of, have Sydney struggled here? Have they, are their first quarter woes back? Then they'll they'll share goals with Port in the rest of the last 10 minutes. I reckon it'll go in roughly 3-2 to Port's way in the first quarter. Second quarter, Sydney will kick probably 4 or 5 goals in that quarter. Port will only kick a couple, so it'll still be relatively close. Then I think Sydney kick 2 quick early goals in that third quarter, and it kind of shuts down, and Sydney just kind of run away with it. Port might rally for a little bit here and there in each of the quarters, but Sydney will just have too much class and be able to see the game out, and then they'll get the win. And I think that's how this final will go. So I'm going to say Swans by 6 goals or so, and that's how it'll be done. And then it'll be interesting to see what does happen with Ken Hinkley if that's the case. I mean, Koshi came out and said that Ken Hinkley will be the coach for 2025. Feels like another year of just Port going around in circles, to be honest. Every year Ken Hinkley's on the hot seat. He does just enough to keep his job, but no one's ever convinced. And at some point, you've just got to give in and say this just hasn't worked, or it's worked, but this is the ceiling we're at. Now's the time to try when you've got the likes of Butters and Rosie and Horn Francis in that squad. Bring in a new coach who can take you to the top and take you to the flag. And I think if they did that early enough, if I was Ken, I'd be looking at West Coast and going, do you know what? Get Port to a prelim. If it doesn't work out, even just quit. It's not worth the turmoil. Go to West Coast for that job. Try get paid a fair bit with a proven record. You'll get time. It'll be a lot less stressful, and go from there. I think that's probably what I would do if I was him. But who knows what he'll be thinking, and I'll go from there. And because I think there's, in the same way with players, there are players who raise your floor and there are players who raise your ceiling. So there are players who, and I think this is most common in basketball, is definitely a sport. See it a lot just because there's only 5 players on the court, but one player can have a larger impact. But some players if you have them on your team and not too much else in terms of quality, you'll be like a minimum playing team kind of side. Whereas then you have the players who might not necessarily be as good as the floor raisers, but just the way they play, how well they can fit into systems, they'll be able to take a good team to a contender, whereas the other floor raiser might just be able to take a bad team to a good team, solid team kind of base. And to me, the 2 best floor raisers I've seen of like kind of my time watching it and facing it is in their primes, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul. I think they were just able to get so much out of the teams that they played in, able to carry them so well. That's what they could do. And then you get the other players who could just take teams to contenders. And an example of that could be a Drew Holiday. He did it with the Bucks. He's done it with the Celtics. Just the way he can just slide into any team, his versatility. He can take a team that's good to being great. He can be their missing piece because he doesn't have to be the star of the show, but he's good enough to give you all-star numbers. He just doesn't have to do that, and then he can impact the defensive side of the ball. The tangent of that was, before I go too far into the NBA and go too far down that rabbit hole, the tangent of that to say is you can see it with coaches as well, that I think Ken Hinkley is just a floor-raising coach. I think he's someone who can take a good can take a bad team, develop them, and get them into finals contention and upper finals contention. But I don't know he's going to be able to take them over the hump. Whereas you get a Craig McRae from Collingwood, who's, to me, he strikes me as kind of the opposite. He'll get a good team to win a flag, or Adam Simpson as well, I think, is like this. He'll get a good team to win a flag, but he just the rebuild's not really there. And I've got my suspicions for the Crows. I think Matthew Nicks might be a coach who can take a bad team to finals. I don't know I can envisage him being a premiership winning coach kind of thing. So I think there will eventually be a ceiling that the Crows reach and will need to move on from him. But that's kind of where things lie. And I think, so Ken Hinkley going to West Coast and making that move, if they do flounder against Sydney, I think that would be a big move for a smart move for his career, and get that stability and get out the media, because this circus constantly of every year is so tiring. Just constantly a case of, well, Port will be good this year, and then Port are pretty good at the start of the year, and everyone's like, yeah, see, great contenders, look how good Ken's doing, and then they'll struggle, and it's Ken out, this is the same old thing we see every year. Why is this always happening? Just get rid of him now. And then they'll hit some form, and then they'll make finals or make top four, and it's oh, well, maybe Ken's back and he's safe, and then eventually it's a Ken's safe for next year, and next year we do the same thing. It just, at some point, that's just not sustainable to have. You can't just have a coach constantly fighting for his job every year. That's not, you can't implement a vision that way. So I think if things go bad, I can see Ken still being out the door after the Koshy, even despite the Koshy comments there, but I think Sydney will win. And then moving on from a coach who hasn't quite been able to get it done in Ken Hinkley to a bona fide proven winner, one of the best coaches of all time. I mean, just for what he's won, Chris Scott at Geelong. And this just, Geelong haven't felt like they've been that good. In the finals, they haven't felt like it. During the regular season, they didn't feel like they were that good. Yet somehow, here they are at a prelim. Geelong once again in finals, showing up, knowing what it takes. And they just, it's their experience. And the win they were able to get against, who did they, they thumped Port. That's right. Thumping Port in that first game without Tom Stewart. I think he's back, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the teams will be released tomorrow night, so we'll wait and see, but him back in the side will be massive. I can see Danger stepping up again like he did against Port. The big talking point is whether Hawkins will come back in. It's one of the, I don't know, based on form, he should, but I would be shocked if he didn't, because it's also, there is something to that being there, done it, knows what it takes to win attitude that I think his experience can provide. And I would still, if you're giving me a one-off game, despite form, I would take Tom Hawkins over a lot of players in a one-off game. If you're backing me, if it's the grand final and you give me free range of forwards, I can pick and build up my perfect forward line, I'm taking Tom Hawkins over a lot of other forwards in the competition. And so I can see a world where he still gets picked for Chris Scott and they get it there. They'll have a big crowd. I can't remember if this one's at the MCG. I'm just going to check. Yeah, it's at the MCG. I hope that was a choice by Geelong to have it at the MCG. For me, I think a home team, the home team in finals should be able to pick wherever their finals get played. If Geelong decided, hey, fuck it, we're really good in Darwin, so we're going to play in Darwin. I don't actually know if they're good in Darwin. It's just an example. But we're going to make this final prelim play in Darwin because to us, that's our home field advantage. They should have every right. I understand from a business side of it why the AFL wouldn't want that, but I think there is a certain sporting point. Understanding there's a reasonable, teams aren't really going to do that. I think you should be able to give them the choice and understand it. So, but it would be interesting. Brisbane notoriously struggle at the MCG in finals unless they're playing Melbourne. It's the only team they seem to be able to beat there. Geelong just know what it takes to get it done. Brisbane have a lot of momentum coming in from last week, some big performances. They'll be up and about. That comeback will be riding a big wave of momentum. Will that be enough? They'll be the big test. I think this will be, I can see Brisbane having a pretty fast and hard start, kind of riding that momentum, and then Geelong crawling it back over time, just staying within touching distance kind of throughout, and then in, say, the third quarter making their move, or last quarter just kind of, say they're 2 goals down at 3/4 time, then last quarter they kind of run through it and Brisbane kind of run out of steam, because Brisbane put in such an effort. I think it's since round 11, what was it? They went 11, they just won out for most of it, a couple of losses here and there at the end of the season, but for the most part, just went through it, and that'll take a toll. And after the emotional high of last week, will they be able to back that up and keep it going the full 4 quarters against such a strong outfit in Geelong and such an experienced outfit? That'll be tough to see, because I wouldn't be shocked if Geelong try and kill a bit of momentum early in the game. Do they know the Lions are going to have a fast start and basically come out and just try and keep the ball as tactic a bit? You see it a lot in soccer as well, where you know a team's up for momentum, they're going to start fast, and a team will just kind of pass around the back and go for the first few minutes, 5 minutes, to try and keep the ball as a way of like, okay, well, your adrenaline's now wearing off. Now we can play our game and go from there. Is that something the Cats will look to implement? So it'll be interesting. I think Jeremy Cameron's will have another big game. I think it'll definitely be the battle of the forwards, I would say, is my initial thought. That how straight can the Lions kick? They kicked straight when it mattered at the end. Joe Danaher coming up clutch, but will they be able to do that for the full game? Because I do think if you give Geelong a lead like you gave the Giants, then Geelong won't let that slip. They'll probably just compound it even more. So it'll need to be a bigger effort from the Lions. I think they won't be able to have the same run and comeback they did against the Giants. They'll need a fast start and try and really get out to a good lead, because I think the experience factor for Geelong will play a big part. And I know Lions made the grand final last year, so they do have the experience of winning a prelim. They do have that there, but multiple time premiership players and coaches, that proper finals experience, they've really been there, done it multiple times recently, know what it takes. That can carry a lot, and I think that's worth a lot. And so it feels like similar to what Collingwood had last year for me in Sidebottom and Pendlebury towards the end, kind of getting there. Jeremy Howe, it felt like that's what helped carry Collingwood through, and I can see that being the same for Geelong. And personally, I hope Geelong do win it all. Of the 4 teams of the team I dislike the least, I'd say. I'm not a massive fan of Geelong. I really like Patrick Dangerfield for everything he did for the Crows. I think he's a phenomenal player to me. I have no hard feelings when he left, because he did just return home, so I do hope he does well. Then after Geelong, if Geelong don't win it, it's just an anyone but Port for me. Just hopefully they don't win it. I'd be shocked if they did, but it'll be exciting, I think. I mean, I'm thinking about the matchups potentially for the grand final. You've got Port Lions replay of 2004. So, I mean, Lions won't necessarily be looking for revenge. It's a completely different set of players, but they'll definitely feed to the emotion of the game for the fans. Port Geelong, think of 2007 when Geelong absolutely thumped Port, and one of if not the biggest winning margins in finals history. I think that'll be a big matchup. Sydney Geelong back to 2022. That's a big final. Sydney looking for revenge against them, and how will that look? Will they be able to fight back and hurdle and climb over those demons? I saw New South Wales journalist, I can't remember his name unfortunately, but he likened Sydney's finals runs to Rocky. It was never beaten Giants in the finals, beat them, Rocky won. Just lost to Port by 100 points in the regular season, beat them, Rocky 2. Versus Geelong in the grand final, who thumped them only a couple of years ago, and it's Rocky 3. So I can see that narrative there, and probably what I expect to happen, to be honest. But then you also got a Lions Sydney grand final, which is state of origin-esque for New South Wales and Queensland fans. So that's a big marketing ploy that you could definitely approach for it. I know it's not the AFL's version of state of origin, it's the NRL's, but for those states, it's still a big thing and can definitely be looked at that way. So it'll be a big match. But for to have 4 teams from 4 different states, I think it's quite exciting. It shows a lot of growth in the game and where it's at. And it's big. And you saw in the finals, you had it was Sydney interstate, Port interstate, Lions, GWS, Geelong. So you had Freo didn't end up making it. West. I know. So not every state was represented, but I'm just going to bring up the ladder. It would just be a bit easier for me to look at the entire ladder when it loads. So you had, 4 interstate teams of the 8. I think that's a good start there. And you look as you go down, Freo in 10th. And then I think next year you could see quite a few of the interstate teams really making a charge and taking out some of the current Victorian teams from the top 8, which is exciting to see and shows a lot of growth in the game. But we'll speak to that as we get to the off season. So yeah, my predictions, I think Geelong by a couple of goals, Sydney by 6 goals or so. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who you think will win, who you want to win. What are the key matchups you're looking forward to? Is there a storyline going to the grand final you're most excited for? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to like and subscribe as well. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day.